the World Cup quarterfinal playoff match between Arjun Erigaisi and Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa, two Indian stars, was epic. It went right down to a sudden death 3-minute game. Absolute madness. They traded wins back and forth. It was such a close match. Hard to take it all in, frankly, in just one video report. But what I'm going to do, I want to show you one game. The first two 25-minute games, it was 1-1. They won one apiece. This was the first 10-minute game, and I think it shows the quality that was on display in this match. It was incredible. So it's a 10-minute game. Arjun Erigaisi playing white, Praggnanandhaa playing black. A centre counter. Wow. That's pretty unusual, but it is a 10-minute game. You can get away with a lot with shorter time controls. And these players know each other incredibly well. They're good friends. They are taking walks together in the evening, even, in the middle of this match together. I think that's fantastic to see. So, friends but rivals as well. Bishop d2. Now, this starts this idea. So, instead of the normal, I say normal, it's not great. Instead of knight c3 and so on, Erigaisi goes for this big clamp, a kind of Marozzi bind. So he's trying to just prevent d5. And if black hasn't got this pawn break, then and white can maintain this space advantage, then that's pretty nice. But it is so time consuming. And the fact that this queen stands very awkwardly here, the king is still in the middle. These pieces are on their starting blocks. I don't like it at all. I'm not sure what's wrong with just castling here, but Praggnanandhaa was provoked. He played knight g4. Wanted to somehow punish white, punish Erigaisi here. And he's poking and probing. The bishop comes to an active square. He obviously felt that this might become, weaken these squares somehow. And knight e5 and knight d4. So black's pieces are very active. And it feels somehow a little bit dubious for white. Could be very dubious, if black succeeds in breaking with b5 at an early stage. But watch what happens. Knight d5. Good move. Has the bishop in its sights. Bishop e6. Still, black has so much activity here. You feel it has to be fine. But things turned round very quickly. Bishop c3. Notice there's a lot of pressure on this knight. Black castled. Exchange on f6 and knight f3. And you can see that suddenly there's just too much pressure on this knight for black. And things are looking good. White is going to win a pawn. However, that king is pretty exposed because of the advanced c-pawn. So let's see how Pragg managed to get some compensation. So the queen came back and the pawn was duly taken. So if white can consolidate this, it's got a beautiful position. Let's, tuck the king in the corner. Play the bishop out to e2. Maybe double here. Bishop. Yeah, pressure on this one. It looks beautiful with this centre. So it's absolutely vital that black hits out here. So b5 played instantly by Pragg, and I think you just have to do this for better or for worse. You have to somehow expose white's king and open some files. It's the only way of getting counterplay. If queen takes pawn, then queen b7, that's not so clear. Looking at this pawn, looking at that pawn, and maybe opening up the king. King b1. Okay, tucking the king into the corner, but still, files are opening. So what's the score? White is 1 pawn up, but, well, things have cleared a little bit. There's a semi-open file here, open C file. White has to keep tabs on this pawn, and the pressure has been relieved from D6 as well. A5. Well, of course, this is going to be the target, so it's absolutely necessary this pawn advances. Otherwise, white will be able to just consolidate with B3. Rook H2. Nice move. The rook defends here and can switch across to one of these squares. A4. Okay, let's stop that one in its tracks. A3. And rook C8 hits the queen. I'm rattling through these moves. I mean, I think they're pretty reasonable. But it's a long game, I'm telling you. And it went right down to the wire. This is so interesting. Pragg played H6. Okay, you've got to do something about your back rank. I was slightly surprised that it was played here. I mean, you could move the rook across and try and get it on B3 fairly quickly. I mean, it looks like reasonable compensation because, of course, if white ever takes here, then black can take this one. So H6 looked a little slow, but it's the kind of move you make in blitz, you know. I mean, this is virtually a blitz game. 10 minutes with, I can't remember how much, I think 10 minutes and they get 10 seconds increment per move. Rook C2. Well, of course, black could duck the exchange, but Pragg decided to exchange. I found that a little bit surprising. I mean, you know, every exchange benefits white. White's a pawn up, and you just want to simplify to an endgame, basically. But this was Pragg's idea. He's sort of looking at these pawns and thinking, yeah, we could sort of induce some weaknesses here. So now this one gets hit, queen f6 and f5. So you never know, that pawn could be loose. This one is still, you know, can't be protected. And, you know, this diagonal is now closed. So the king should be pretty safe on h7. The only thing is that square is covered. There could be an attack on the 8th rank. We'll see that in a second. But I can understand why Pragg induced this move f5 because now this is clear as well. You know, there's going to be no e5, nasty e5 at some point. Rook b8. So that ties white to defending this one. Rook b5. Rook d2. Rook b3. I think Pragg changed his mind. So this looks pretty reasonable. You know, sweeps across here. Rook d3 stops that. And Pragg wanted to keep the tension. He just withdrew the rook to b6. I wonder how easy is this position to win? You know, queen and pawn endgames, notoriously difficult. But, you know, only one side can win that one, basically. So I can understand why Pragg just brought the rook back. He wants to keep as much tension in the position as possible. You know, in virtually a blitz game, that's when things happen, when there's tension. Rook c3. But it feels like Erigaisi has basically made progress here. Queen d4. Yeah, black keeping active. And it's a tricky move. You know, if rook c4, then thank you very much. That wins a pawn. So queen d3. Nope, don't want the endgame, thank you. Queen e5, queen c4, the queen creeping up the board. Looking at that pawn, maybe looking at the king as well. Queen h2, threatening mate, so rook c2. So there's a trade of pawns. And queen takes a4. So white is still a pawn up. And if queen takes g4, this did not happen. And now we can see that that pawn on f5 is actually very useful because it covers g6 and queen h8 mate will happen very soon. So Pragg just brought the rook back to b8. And this is a really interesting moment in the game. Pragg was, from memory, Pragg was actually shorter on time than Erigaisi. So Erigaisi had a little bit of time to invest. Now, how do you make progress here? How do you convert this extra pawn into a win? And it's not easy because this pawn is under fire. If that one drops, then that pawn's a runner. You want to get these pawns going, but of course that would expose the king. That's a problem. I mean, instinctively, you would love to exchange queens and then start pushing this duo. But how do you exchange queens here? Not so easy. But Erigaisi invested a bit of time here. And he played rook c7. So, his instinct was to play actively. And I think this is a very sound instinct. So he gave up the pawn on g4. Queen c4. So he's tying black to defending this pawn. Rook f8. And then he started pushing the a pawn. So that's just relieved some pressure from the pressure on b2. And now, whoops, I beg your pardon. a4 just being played. That's the position. Yeah, relieve some pressure here. And he can start pushing that one. But in the meantime, Pragg has counterplay on the other side of the board. h5. So really tense now with both players right down to the wire with time, playing on their final few seconds, and living on the increment, living on the extra 10 seconds they were getting. a6, and here Pragg realised, well, if I keep pushing, white is going to win. So, for example, h3, rook c8, h2. Okay, we can exchange rooks. And a7. So the queen can't get back to defend. And after this one, well, basically the king is going to be checked to oblivion, and that's that. White wins. I mean, there are various other lines there, but basically he realised h3 was going to lose. So this is where it looked like he was lost in the position. It looked like he was about to lose on time. So what did he do? He found an extraordinary chance. d5. And that, I think it's a brilliant randomizer. If Erigaisi had 5 minutes here, 5 minutes would probably be enough to calculate this out. Then I think he'd find the win here without too much difficulty. But he was down to the wire as well. And what do you do when you see a move like d5? You're just kind of, what? You can take it in two ways. Probably both are very good. One could head for an endgame here. But you've got to check this one. You've got to check queen f5. The most natural move is queen takes d5, and that's what he did. So how does this change things? Well, Pragg moved his queen to e2. That was the idea. He's just distracted this queen. And it's getting tricky. So the queen looking to bounce back here. And again, players had so little time. Erigaisi, I think very understandably, played his queen back to c4 just to shut out black's queen. Looks like the most natural move. But if he'd had more time, then, for example, I'm sure there's many winning moves, but queen c6 is actually very strong. But you still have to find some amazing moves. Let me just show you one variation. So I can understand why he rejected something like this, because that queen is really annoying. And, you've got to look out for that pawn as well. So there could be variations such as this. Check, king b3, h3. I mean, this looks terrifying. In fact, white is winning. Rook takes f7. It's a brilliant move. King takes allows queen e6 mate. And of course, rook takes, you get a queen. Well, how on earth are you going to find such variations when you have no time on the clock? So queen c4 in that respect I think is a very understandable move. You want to block out the queen because you're worried about your king. You want to push this one forward. Let's just go queen c4. Incredibly, this is a blunder. Pragg exchanged queens. Now that must have been very unexpected. And after this move, that pawn is in big trouble because, you know, you want to play rook a4. But then that pawn is pushed and there's no time to connect. So Erigaisi played b4. Rook takes, check, king here, h3. So now material is level. That's a strong passed pawn. This is a strong passed pawn too. And rook h6. They were down to the wire here. You know, it's a very complex endgame. But isn't it amazing how Pragg has just kind of turned things around? Here, check was given and the king came up. I think Erigaisi wanted to do this because he wanted to make sure the king wasn't coming over here. You know, you could come back. You know, maybe he just thought, well, the king is going to come across and can stop this one easily. And so I think that's why rook c8 check, king h7 was played. But actually the king is not badly placed here. I mean, at first glance, it seems as though white shouldn't have any problems. The rook can blockade the pawn. The king will support the b pawn. But watch, g5. These two pawns threatening to unite. So, okay, en passant, that knocked it back a square. And this is now impossible to defend if you've got very little time. So the threat is just to join up the pawns. In fact, the computer indicates that e5 is the only move to draw. Now, how on earth you find this move? Listen, I'm going to leave you to explore that. It's not a very human move. b6 was played, understandably. But here's the point. These pawns are able to join up and that rook is able to defend here because b7, rook b6, check. Nasty. Picks up the pawn. So rook c7 played. If b7, a check. g4, and you can win that rook, but those two pawns go through. One of them goes through, and that's roughly what happened in the game. So a check, check here. Now there's only one winning move. Black's play and win. Over to you. I've shown you that other variation, so you shouldn't find this too difficult. Anyway, you have a think. Black's play and win. Just give the rook, and then these pawns can advance, and one of them is going through. And Erigaisi was hoping that perhaps he could survive this one, but no. In fact, it's possible to pick up that pawn very easily, very quickly. And then, well, we all know that queen against rook is a theoretical win, so you just have to bring the king forward and watch out for stalemates, basically. Eventually you're going to do it. I suppose 50 move rule is the only problem. I mean, actually, it's incredible that Erigaisi managed to survive with the rook away from the king. There's probably a way to win it, but anyway, the way that Pragg did it was very secure. And queen a4 was the final move. That's it. If rook d2, then king c3. I think you can see that is curtains for white. What extraordinary resilience Praggnanandhaa showed. I mean, this never say die spirit. And I think exemplified by this extraordinary move, d5. Now, I mean, here, given that pushing the h-pawn is the main source of counterplay, but Pragg kind of stopped and realised, okay, I need some randomizer here, and found an incredible idea, d5, which just kind of short-circuited Erigaisi. And then, I mean, to win this rook and pawn endgame, is something else. So was this a perfect game by Pragg? Obviously not. But somehow, after a very curious opening where he found himself worse, I think to create enough counterplay was really impressive. Now, after that, Erigaisi hit back in the next game, and then they traded more wins and losses, and eventually Pragg won in the 3-minute game. So it was unbelievably tight, but Praggnanandhaa goes through into the semi-finals and will face Fabiano Caruana. And in the other semi-final, Carlsen plays Abasov. I'm going to have a quick drink, hang on. Yeah, Abasov, the real surprise in the tournament. It's going to be really tight. FIDE on Friday, and they play again on Saturday. That's when the semi-finals take place. Thanks for watching.